The salvage ship cut through the darkness of space like a knife through water. Inside the cargo bay, Jiho checked his tools for the third time that morning. He was a mechanic, nothing special in the eyes of most people. His hands were rough from years of work, his jumpsuit stained with oil and grease. But Jiho loved machines. He understood them in a way that most people never could. His sister Hyan walked into the bay, her tablet glowing in her hands. She was younger than him by 5 years, smarter than most people gave her credit for. "We're about to land on Helios 7, she said. "The scans show millions of machines down there, all dead." Jiho looked up from his toolbox. "Dead how long?" 500 years, maybe more." Hyan swiped through data on her screen. "The Coalition records say it was some old human war. Nobody remembers much about it." Before Jiho could respond, Captain Velthar's voice boomed through the speakers. The reptilian commander loved the sound of his own voice. "All crew, prepare for landing. This is a simple job. We take the metal, we sell the metal, we get rich. Don't waste time on anything else." Jiho and Hyan exchanged looks. Velthar was a good captain for making money, but he had no respect for history. To him, everything old was just trash waiting to be recycled. The ship shook as it entered the atmosphere. Jiho grabbed a support bar and watched through the viewport as the planet came into view. Helios 7 was a desert world, all red sand and empty sky. But as they got closer, he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. Machines, millions of them, standing in perfect rows across the desert like a silent army. They were humanoid in shape, maybe 7 feet tall, with smooth armor that caught the sunlight. Even from high above, Jiho could see they were beautiful, elegant. Nothing like the clunky war machines he had seen in museums. The ship landed with a heavy thud. Dust swirled around the hull as the cargo ramp lowered. Jiho grabbed his toolkit and followed the other crew members outside. The heat hit him immediately, dry and intense, but he barely noticed. He was staring at the nearest robot. It stood 20 feet away, frozen in place. Its armor was pristine, not a scratch or dent visible. The metal seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Its face was smooth and featureless except for 2 dark eye sockets, dead eyes, empty eyes. Captain Velthar walked past Jiho and kicked the robot's leg. The sound echoed across the desert. "Primitive human junk," he said with a laugh. "Look at this. 500 years and nobody wanted these things. That tells you everything you need to know about human engineering." Several alien crew members laughed. Jiho felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago that arguing with Velthar only made things worse. Mira, the ship's pilot, came to stand beside Jiho. She was human like him, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "He's an idiot." "I know," Jiho said, but he kept staring at the robot. Something about it felt wrong, not broken wrong, just waiting wrong. Velthar clapped his scaled hands together. "Listen up. We have 3 days to harvest as much metal as we can carry. Start with the power cores. They'll fetch the best price. Then strip the armor plating. Leave the rest." The crew scattered, pulling out cutting tools and plasma torches. Jiho walked slowly between the rows of robots, studying them. They were all identical, all standing in the same position. Hands at their sides, heads facing forward. Like soldiers waiting for orders that never came. Hyan appeared at his shoulder. "I ran a material scan," she said quietly. "These things are made from alloys we don't use anymore. Stronger than modern metals. Lighter, too." "Anything else?" She hesitated. "Their power cores are still active." Jiho turned to look at her. "What?" "Not powered on, but not dead either. It's like they're sleeping." Hyan pulled up a reading on her tablet. "I've never seen anything like this. A power source that can stay dormant for 500 years without degrading." Jiho's mind raced. If the power cores were intact, what about the rest of the systems? He approached the nearest robot and pulled out his scanner. The device hummed as it swept over the metal body. Data scrolled across the small screen. Neural network intact. Motor systems intact. Weapon systems intact. Memory core intact. Everything was intact. Everything was just turned off. "This doesn't make sense," Jiho muttered. "If these things were abandoned, they should have decayed, rusted, fallen apart. But look at them. They're perfect." Mira walked over with a concerned expression. "Velthar wants us to start cutting into them. He's assigned you to extract power cores from the western section." Jiho looked at the rows of robots stretching to the horizon. Thousands of them, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, all waiting, all silent. "Mira, have you ever seen anything like this? An army just left standing in the desert?" She shook her head. "It's strange. I'll give you that." As the day wore on, Jiho worked mechanically, extracting power cores from robots that had stood for half a millennium. But he did it carefully, respectfully. Each core glowed with a soft blue light when removed. Each one hummed with energy that should have died centuries ago. When the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Jiho found himself alone with one robot at the edge of the formation. The rest of the crew had returned to the ship for dinner. He should have gone too, but something made him stay. He pulled out his portable interface unit and connected it to a port on the robot's chest, just to look, just to see what was inside. The screen flickered and lines of code appeared. Old code. Human code from an era long past. Then something unexpected happened. The screen changed. A single line of text appeared, typed out one letter at a time as if someone was writing it. "Who are you?" Jiho jerked back, his heart hammering. He looked up at the robot's face. The eyes were still dark, still empty. But had something flickered there, just for a second? He looked back at his screen. The message remained. He took a breath and typed back. "My name is Jiho. I'm human. Who are you?" The response came faster this time. "Unit 729, designation Deho, status standby mode. How long has it been?" Jiho's hands shook as he typed. 500 years. There was a long pause. Then, "Has the swarm returned?" "What swarm?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Another pause. "Then we are still not needed. I will return to standby. But thank you, Jiho. Thank you for remembering us." The screen went blank. The connection died. Jiho stared at the robot, but it remained motionless. He waited for 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing happened. Finally, he disconnected his equipment and walked back toward the ship. His mind was spinning with questions. Who was Deho? What was the swarm? Why had these machines been left here? He decided not to tell anyone yet, not until he understood more. But as he climbed the ramp into the ship, he looked back one more time at the silent army. They didn't look like junk to him. They looked like guardians, waiting for something terrible to return. Jiho couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the metal ceiling of his quarters, thinking about the message. Unit 729, Daiho. A machine that had been asleep for 500 years had spoken to him, had asked him questions, had thanked him. Around midnight, he gave up trying to rest. He grabbed his toolkit and interface unit, then crept through the dark corridors of the ship. Everyone else was asleep. Even the night watch crew was probably dozing at their stations. Nobody cared much about security on a salvage job. The cargo ramp opened with a soft hiss. Jiho slipped outside into the cool desert night. Twin moons hung in the sky, casting silver light across the sand. The robot army stood like statues in the moonlight, their armor gleaming. Jiho made his way back to the same robot from earlier. Unit 729. Deho. He connected his interface again and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then text appeared on his screen. You came back. Jiho typed quickly. I need to understand. What are you? What is this place? The response came slowly, as if the machine was choosing words carefully. We are the Sentinels, created by humanity during the Silence War. Our purpose, to protect human colonies from the Void Swarm. I've never heard of the Silence War or the Void Swarm. That does not surprise me. The Coalition erased the war from history. They did not want other species to know how powerful humanity could be when threatened. Jiho felt cold despite the warm night air. Why would they do that? Fear. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy, young and unproven. Then the swarm came from beyond known space, consuming everything in their path. Humanity built us in desperation. We won the war in 3 years. After we won, the Coalition was afraid of what else humans might build. Jiho sat down in the sand, his legs suddenly weak. So they made everyone forget. Yes, they convinced human leaders to deactivate us and hide us away. In exchange, humanity gained full membership in the Coalition. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. But you're still here, millions of you. We are placed at strategic points across the galaxy. 12 cache sites in total. Helios 7 is the largest. We were told to wait in standby mode until the swarm returned. Our creators believed they would come back. The swarm always returns. Jiho's mind raced. How do you know they'll come back? Because that is what they do. Every 500 years, they sweep through this region of space. They feed, they grow, and then they retreat to digest their harvest. We have been waiting for the next cycle. And when is that supposed to happen? There was a pause. When Deho answered, his words made Jiho's blood run cold. According to my calculations, they are overdue by approximately 50 years. They could arrive at any time. Jiho stood up quickly, pacing back and forth. We have to warn people. The Coalition needs to know. They will not listen. They have no record of the swarm, no memory of the Silence War. They will think you are crazy. Then we wake you up, all of you, right now. I cannot wake the others without proper authorization. Only someone with the correct genetic markers can activate the full Sentinel protocol. Someone descended from the original commanders. Jiho kicked the sand in frustration. Where are we supposed to find someone like that? It's been 500 years. I do not know. But if the swarm returns and we are not activated, this entire region of space will be consumed. Billions will die. Before Jiho could respond, lights cut through the darkness. He spun around to see a ground vehicle approaching fast. Captain Velthar stood in the back, his scales reflecting the vehicle's headlights. What are you doing out here, human? Velthar's voice boomed across the desert. The vehicle stopped 20 feet away. Several crew members climbed out, including Mira and Hyon. They must have noticed Jiho was missing. Jiho quickly disconnected his interface. Just working, Captain. Couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd get ahead on tomorrow's quota. Velthar walked forward, his eyes narrow with suspicion. Working? Or talking to this junk? He gestured at Unit 729. I saw your interface light from the ship. What were you doing? Just running diagnostics on the power core. The captain's tail swished angrily. You're lying. I can smell it. He turned to one of the crew members. Check his interface log. Jiho's heart sank. The log would show everything. The conversation, the activation attempt, all of it. But before anyone could take his equipment, Hyon stepped forward. Captain, I asked him to do it. Everyone turned to look at her. She kept her face calm and confident. I found something strange in the power core signatures. I asked Jiho to investigate one of the units more closely, to see if there was a defect that might affect their salvage value. Velthar studied her for a long moment. And what did you find? Hyon pulled up her tablet. The cores are more advanced than we thought. They're worth triple what we estimated, maybe more. If we're careful with the extraction, we could make a fortune. Greed flickered in the captain's eyes. Triple? At least? But only if we don't damage them. That's why Jiho was being so careful. Velthar grunted. Fine. But no more midnight walks. If I catch you out here again without permission, you'll be scrubbing waste recyclers for a month. Understood? Yes, Captain. The crew loaded back into the vehicle and drove away, leaving Jiho and Hyon standing alone with Mira. As soon as the lights disappeared, Jiho let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Thank you, he said to his sister. Hyon crossed her arms. You want to tell me what's really going on? And don't lie. I can always tell when you're lying. Jiho looked at Mira, then back at Hyon. These were the only two people on the ship he truly trusted. Slowly, carefully, he told them everything. About Deho, about the Silence War, about the Void Swarm. When he finished, there was a long silence. Mira spoke first. This is insane. I know how it sounds. No, I mean it's insane that the Coalition would hide something like this. She looked at the rows of silent robots. If these things really were built to fight some kind of invasion, and that invasion might come back, we need proof. Hyon was already typing on her tablet. I'm accessing the Coalition Historical Database. Let me see if I can find any gaps or anomalies around 500 years ago. They waited while she worked. The desert night was quiet except for the soft beeping of her tablet. Finally, she looked up. There's something here, a 20-year period where almost no records exist. No major events, no wars, no exploration, just nothing, like someone deleted it all. That would be when the Silence War happened, Jiho said. Mira crouched down and touched the sand. So what do? We can't fight the Coalition. We can't force them to listen. No. But we can find someone with the right genetic markers to wake these machines. Jiho turned to Hyon. You're good with genealogy databases, right? Could you trace back our family line 500 years? Why our family? Because something made me come out here tonight. Something made me connect to this specific robot. Maybe it wasn't random. Hyon stared at him for a moment, then started typing again. This is going to take time. Family records from that era are fragmented. A lot was lost during the Coalition integration. Do what you can. If there's even a chance I'm descended from one of the original commanders, we need to know. They worked through the night, Hyon tracing genetic records while Jiho tried to access more information from Deho. The machine answered his questions patiently, explaining how the Sentinels operated, what weapons they carried, how they thought and fought. As the sun began to rise, painting the desert gold and red, Hyon suddenly grabbed Jiho's arm. I found something. She turned her tablet to show him a family tree. There at the top, 500 years in the past, was a name, Commander Sujin. Below it, a direct line down through the generations to Jiho and Hyon. Our great-grandmother, Hyon whispered. She was one of the Sentinel Protocol architects. Her genetic signature is registered in the Coalition military archives as a Level 1 commander. Jiho stared at the screen. Then I can wake them. If Deho is telling the truth. He is. Jiho didn't know how he knew. He just did. Mira looked toward the horizon. Then we'd better do it soon, because if that swarm shows up and catches us unprepared, none of this will matter. Jiho reconnected to Deho one more time. I think I have the authorization you need. My sister and I are descended from Commander Sujin. There was a pause. Then, Sujin. Yes, I remember her. She was kind to us. She treated us as people, not just weapons. If you carry her blood, then you can wake us. But are you certain? Once activated, we cannot return to standby without completing our mission. Jiho thought about the millions of people who would die if the swarm returned and nobody was ready. He thought about his sister and Mira, and even Captain Velthar. He thought about all the colonies and stations and worlds that would be consumed. I'm certain. Then place your hand on my chest plate. The biometric scanner will recognize your genetic markers. Jiho stood and placed his palm against the cold metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal warmed under his touch. Blue light spread from his hand, racing across the robot's body like fire. The eyes flickered, brightened, blazed with brilliant blue light. Unit 729 moved for the first time in 500 years, turning his head to look directly at Jiho. "Thank you," Deho said, his voice no longer text on a screen but actual sound, deep and clear, "for believing in us." Before Jiho could respond, alarms began blaring from the ship. Hyun checked her tablet and her face went pale. "Unknown contacts," she said. "Dozens of them, emerging from slip space at the edge of the system." Deho's eyes brightened. "The swarm! They have returned!" The alarm cut through the morning air like a scream. Jiho ran toward the ship with Hyun and Mira right behind him. Daiho stood motionless, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the sky as if he could see through the atmosphere to the threat above. Captain Velthar was shouting orders when they reached the cargo bay. Crew members rushed past, scrambling to their stations. The captain grabbed Jiho by the collar. "What did you do?" "Nothing. I don't know what's happening." Hyun pushed between them, holding up her tablet. "Captain, we have incoming vessels. Dozens of them. They don't match any known ship signatures in the Coalition database." Velthar released Jiho and snatched the tablet. His scaled face went pale as he studied the readings. "What are those things?" On the screen, the contacts looked wrong. Organic shapes mixed with mechanical parts, ships that seemed to breathe and pulse. They were moving fast, too fast, directly toward Helios 7. "We need to leave," Velthar said. "Now, get this ship ready for launch in 5 minutes." "Wait," Jiho said. "We can't just run." "Those things are coming here for a reason." "I don't care about their reasons. I care about staying alive." Mira grabbed Jiho's arm. "He's right. We're not equipped for combat. This is a salvage ship." But Jiho was thinking about what Deho had told him. The void swarm consumed everything in their path. If they were coming here, they weren't just coming for the robots. They were coming to feed, and once they finished with Helios 7, they would move to the next world, and the next, until someone stopped them. "I need to go back," Jiho said. "I need to wake the others." Velthar laughed, a harsh sound. "Wake them? Those machines have been dead for 500 years. They're not going to save us now." "One of them is already awake. I can prove it." Before the captain could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke, calm and clear. "This is Unit 729, designation Deho. I am requesting permission to activate all Sentinel units on Helios 7. The Void Swarm has returned. We are humanity's defense against extinction." The entire cargo bay fell silent. Everyone stared at the speakers. Velthar's jaw hung open. "How is that possible?" he whispered. Jiho stepped forward. "I woke him, and I can wake the others. But I need time." The ship suddenly shook violently. Red lights flashed throughout the bay. An explosion echoed from somewhere outside. Hyun checked her tablet. "The swarm scouts are entering the atmosphere. They're firing on us." Velthar made a decision. "Do it. Wake whatever you can, but do it fast." Jiho ran back outside with Mira following. The sky above was filled with dark shapes descending through the clouds. The swarm ships were like nothing he had ever seen. They were alive and mechanical at the same time, covered in writhing tendrils and glowing with sickly green light. Daiho stood waiting near the ship. "You must hurry," the robot said. "The swarm will not waste time. They will attack with overwhelming force." "How do I wake the others?" "Your genetic signature is already in my system. I can broadcast the activation sequence to all Sentinel units, but you must give verbal authorization as a descendant of Commander Sujin." Jiho nodded. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "I authorize full activation of all Sentinel units. Wake them up. All of them. Deho's eyes blazed brighter. Energy pulsed out from his body in waves of blue light, spreading across the desert like a tsunami. The light touched the nearest robots and they came alive. Their eyes ignited, their heads turned, their weapon systems activated with mechanical precision. The wave kept spreading. Hundreds of robots woke, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Across the entire desert, millions of sentinels opened their eyes after 5 centuries of sleep. They moved as one, flowing into perfect formation with the efficiency of a single organism. Mira grabbed Jiho's shoulder. "Look at that," she breathed. The robots were moving into defensive positions around the ship. Some were armed with weapons that looked like rifles. Others had blades that extended from their forearms. Still others carried what looked like portable shields. They worked together without speaking, without hesitation. Every movement was coordinated. Deho turned to Jiho. "We will protect you, but you must get to safety. The swarm's first wave is about to arrive." The sky suddenly darkened. Swarm ships burst through the clouds like locusts, hundreds of them, their tentacles whipping the air. They made sounds that hurt to hear, screams mixed with mechanical grinding. Green energy bolts lanced down from the sky, striking the desert and exploding in massive clouds of sand and fire. The sentinels opened fire. Blue energy beams shot upward, tracking the swarm ships with perfect accuracy. The first volley hit 3 ships, tearing them apart in midair. Burning debris rained down across the desert. But more kept coming. The swarm poured from the sky in an endless stream. They were fast and aggressive, diving toward the robots with no regard for their own survival. Some crashed deliberately into sentinel formations, exploding in bursts of corrosive acid. Jiho watched in horror as several robots were destroyed instantly, but the others adapted. They changed their formation, spreading out to minimize casualties. They concentrated their fire on individual targets, bringing down swarm ships one after another with ruthless efficiency. "Get inside!" Captain Velthar's voice boomed from the ship's speakers. "We're launching in 30 seconds!" Jiho started to run, but then he saw something that made him stop. A massive swarm ship, 10 times larger than the others, was descending toward the robot army. Its belly opened and thousands of smaller creatures poured out. They were like insects, each one the size of a dog, covered in sharp legs and snapping mandibles. The swarm creatures hit the ground running, charging straight at the sentinel lines. Jiho thought they would be overwhelmed, but the robots simply switched tactics. Those with blades moved to the front while those with rifles provided covering fire. They cut through the creatures with mechanical precision, never wasting a movement, never showing fear. Deho appeared beside Jiho, moving faster than anything that large should be able to move. "You must leave now. This battle will last for hours. We cannot protect you and fight effectively at the same time." "But what about you? What about all of them?" "We were made for this. We have waited 500 years for this moment. Now go!" Mira grabbed Jiho's hand and pulled him toward the ship. They ran up the cargo ramp just as it began to close. The ship's engines roared to life. Through the viewport, Jiho watched as the desert transformed into a battlefield. The sentinels fought with terrible beauty. They moved like dancers, each one perfectly synchronized with the others. When one fell, 3 more moved to fill the gap. When they fired, they never missed. When they struck, they never hesitated. The swarm was relentless, but the robots were unstoppable. The ship lifted off, rising above the battlefield. Jiho pressed his face against the viewport, watching until the robots became tiny dots far below. Even from high altitude, he could see the flashes of blue and green energy, the explosions, the constant movement of the battle. Jan came to stand beside him. Her face was pale. "The coalition fleet is on its way, but they won't arrive for another 3 hours. Will the robots last that long? I don't know. The swarm keeps sending more ships. It's like they have an endless supply. Captain Velthar's voice came over the intercom. All crew, battle stations. We've been ordered to hold position and provide sensor data to the incoming fleet. We're staying in orbit. Mira cursed under her breath. We're staying? In the middle of a war zone? But Jiho was thinking about something else. Hyun, can you tap into the Sentinel communication network? I want to know how they're doing. His sister worked on her tablet for several minutes. Finally, she established a connection. Audio filled the bridge. It was Daeho's voice, calm and commanding. Units 400 through 600, reinforce the eastern flank. Units 1200 through 1500, focus fire on the large ship at bearing 270. Unit Una, take your squadron and destroy their landing site. Another voice responded, female and strong. Acknowledged, moving to engage. The battle continued through the morning and into the afternoon. The coalition fleet arrived and tried to engage the swarm ships in orbit, but their weapons barely scratched the alien vessels. The swarm's organic armor absorbed most of the damage. Velthar watched the battle displays with growing horror. Our weapons aren't working. How are we supposed to fight these things? Jiho had an idea. Connect me to the Sentinel network. Daeho might know. The captain hesitated, then nodded. Do it. When the connection opened, Jiho spoke quickly. Daeho, the coalition fleet can't hurt the swarm ships. Their weapons aren't effective. Daeho's response came immediately. The swarm uses adaptive shielding. Standard coalition weapons operate on predictable frequencies. They need to randomize their energy output. Can you tell them how? I will upload the specifications to your ship. Share them with the coalition fleet. Within seconds, data flooded Hyun's tablet. She forwarded it to the coalition command ship. At first, they didn't believe it, but after several more failures, they decided to try. The coalition ships modified their weapons, randomizing their frequencies according to the Sentinel data. The next volley tore through 3 swarm ships like paper. Explosions bloomed in space, brilliant and deadly. On the ground, the Sentinels were still fighting. They had destroyed hundreds of swarm vessels, but more kept coming. Jiho watched the battle feeds and felt sick. Some robots were damaged, limping but still fighting. Others were destroyed completely, reduced to scrap metal by overwhelming force. But they never stopped. They never retreated. They fought with the courage of warriors who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. As the sun began to set on Helios 7, the swarm finally pulled back. Their ships retreated beyond the atmosphere, regrouping in orbit. The Sentinels held their positions, waiting for the next attack. Daeho's voice came through the speakers again. This was only the first wave, a scouting force. The main swarm fleet will arrive soon. We estimate 3 days. Jiho felt cold. How many ships in the main fleet? There was a pause. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. We cannot defeat them alone. Captain Velthar looked at Jiho with new respect in his eyes. Then we need more of those robots, all of them. Every single one in the galaxy. Jiho nodded slowly. We need to wake them all. The Coalition High Command Chamber was a massive room built into a space station orbiting the capital world. Representatives from 100 different species sat in circular rows, all watching the center platform where Jiho stood. He had never felt so small in his life. Beside him, Ambassador Kara adjusted her formal uniform. She was human like Jiho, but older and far more experienced in politics. She had agreed to help present their case after seeing the battle footage from Helios 7. Just tell them what you told me, she whispered. The truth, nothing more. Jiho nodded. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. But he thought about Daeho and the other Sentinels fighting alone on that desert world, and he found his courage. The High Chancellor, a tall being covered in purple scales, gestured for silence. We will now hear testimony regarding the incident on Helios 7. Human Jiho, you may speak. Jiho took a deep breath. 3 days ago, My salvage crew discovered an army of robots on Helios 7. We thought they were abandoned war machines. We were wrong. They were placed there deliberately, 500 years ago, to guard against a threat called the Void Swarm. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several representatives looked confused. Others looked skeptical. I activated one of the robots and learned the truth. Humanity fought a war 500 years ago. A war the Coalition erased from history. The enemy was the Void Swarm, an alien force that consumes everything in its path. We built the Sentinels to fight them. We won. But we were told to hide what we had created, to put our protectors to sleep and forget about them. A representative from the Sarkesh delegation stood up. It was someone Jiho recognized from news broadcasts, a powerful politician. This is absurd. There is no record of such a war, no evidence of this supposed swarm. You expect us to believe a fairy tale told by an old machine? Jiho's jaw tightened. The swarm attacked Helios 7 2 days ago. We have video evidence, sensor data, battle recordings. The Sentinels fought them and won. Your own fleet couldn't hurt the swarm until the robots shared their weapons technology. Hyon stepped forward from the back of the platform. She held up her tablet. I have proof. Historical records show a 20-year gap 500 years ago, a period where almost nothing was documented. I also found sealed files in the Coalition archives, files that required genetic clearance from descendants of the original human commanders. My brother and I are descended from Commander Su Jin, one of the Sentinel Protocol architects. She pressed a button, and holographic displays filled the air above them. Images of the Silence War, battle reports, casualty lists, construction schematics for the Sentinels. All of it had been buried deep in classified archives, protected by genetic locks that only someone like Jiho could open. The chamber fell silent as the representatives studied the evidence. Some looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few looked afraid. The High Chancellor leaned forward. If what you say is true, why would we hide this? Why erase such an important part of history? Ambassador Kara stepped to the center of the platform. Because you were afraid. Humanity was new to the Coalition, unproven. Then we built an army of intelligent machines that could defeat an extinction-level threat in 3 years. You saw what we were capable of, and it terrified you. So you made a deal. Hide the Sentinels, erase the war, and in exchange, humanity would gain full Coalition membership. She paused, letting her words sink in. You traded safety for control. You buried our history because you feared us. But now that history is the only thing that can save us. The swarm is coming back, in 3 days, maybe less. And when they arrive, they won't just attack one planet. They'll sweep through dozens of systems, consuming everything. Billions will die. The Sarkesh politician stood again. Even if we believe this tale, what do you expect us to do? Build new robots? That would take years. No, Jiho said. We don't need to build them. They already exist. Daeho told me there are 12 cache sites across the galaxy. Millions of Sentinels, all waiting in standby mode. All we need to do is wake them up. Another representative, this one from an insectoid species, spoke up. And you can do this? Wake all of them? Yes. My genetic signature is already registered in the Sentinel network. I can authorize full activation from any location. And what if we refuse? The Sarkesh politician demanded. What if we choose not to unleash an army of intelligent machines across the galaxy? What guarantee do we have that they won't turn against us? Jiho looked at the politician directly. The Sentinels were programmed with one primary directive: protect humanity, protect life, prioritize the innocent. They fight to save people, not to conquer them. They've been waiting for 500 years to fulfill their purpose. They won't betray that. Mira stepped forward from the side of the platform. She had been waiting there in case she was needed. I fought alongside the Sentinels on Helios 7. I saw them sacrifice themselves to protect our ship. They could have abandoned us and focused purely on military targets. But they didn't. They chose to save lives even when it made the battle harder. The High Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke to the entire assembly. We will vote. Should we authorize the activation of all Sentinel units to combat the Void Swarm threat? The debate lasted for hours. Some representatives argued passionately for activation. Others refused to trust humanity with such power. The Sarkesh delegation was the most vocal in opposition, calling it a trap, a scheme to make humanity the dominant military force in the galaxy. Finally, as night fell across the station, the vote was called. Holographic displays showed the results in real time. Green for yes, red for no. The count was close, terrifyingly close. When the final vote was tallied, activation was approved by a margin of only 7 votes. The High Chancellor looked exhausted. The motion passes. Jiho of humanity, you are authorized to activate all Sentinel units. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all. Jiho felt relief wash over him, but there was no time to celebrate. Every minute wasted was a minute closer to the swarm's arrival. I need access to a high-power communication array, something that can broadcast across multiple systems simultaneously. You will have it, the Chancellor said. Along with full coalition support, we will mobilize our fleets to work alongside the Sentinels. Over the next 2 days, Jiho worked around the clock. The coalition gave him access to their most powerful communication network. He connected to the Sentinel systems and began the activation sequence. One by one, cache sites across the galaxy came online. On a frozen moon in the outer rim, 50,000 Sentinels opened their eyes. On a jungle world near the core systems, 200,000 awoke. On orbital platforms, on asteroids, in hidden bunkers on forgotten worlds, the robots stirred from their long sleep. Hyon coordinated the logistics, working with Coalition Command to position the Sentinels where they would be most effective. Mira flew transport missions, moving equipment and personnel to critical locations. Daiho became the central coordinator for the entire Sentinel network. His consciousness spread across millions of units, processing data from 1,000 battles simultaneously. He spoke with Jiho several times each day, providing updates and requesting authorization for tactical decisions. The swarm fleet has been spotted, Daiho reported on the morning of the 3rd day. They are moving faster than expected. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours. Jiho was in the command center with Ambassador Kara and Captain Velthar. The captain had volunteered his ship and crew to help with the defense. He was a changed person after witnessing the first battle. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something like respect. Are we ready? Jiho asked. Daiho's voice was calm. We have activated 3 million Sentinels across 12 systems. Coalition forces number approximately 10,000 ships. The enemy fleet is estimated at 50,000 vessels. Our chances of victory are 37%. Kara closed her eyes. Not great odds. No, Daiho agreed. But we have something the swarm does not understand. We fight for more than survival. We fight for the people we were created to protect. That makes us stronger than they can comprehend. New units appeared on the holographic display. 3 of them had names attached. Unit 445, designation Yuna. Unit 892, designation Taeyang. Unit 1203, designation Hana. They were Sentinel commanders, each controlling thousands of units. Yuna's voice came through the speakers, sharp and precise. Strategic analysis complete. We should concentrate our forces at the Helios system. Force the swarm to fight us there rather than spreading across multiple worlds. Taeyang disagreed. Too risky. If we lose, they'll have a clear path to the core systems. Hana offered a compromise. We split our forces. 2/3 at Helios, 1/3 distributed to protect key population centers. If Helios falls, We have backup. The Sentinel commanders debated tactics like experienced generals. They considered every angle, every possibility. Jiho listened in awe. These weren't mindless machines following programming. They were thinking beings, strategizing and adapting. In the end, they agreed on Hana's plan. 2 million Sentinels moved to Helios 7, forming defensive positions across the system. The remaining 1 million spread out to guard the most vulnerable colonies. Coalition ships moved into position alongside the robots. For the first time in 500 years, organic and synthetic warriors stood together against a common enemy. Jiho stood in the command center and watched the clock count down. 5 hours, 4, 3. His heart pounded with each passing minute. Hyan came to stand beside him. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. I hope so. 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then the alarms began to blare. Sensor displays lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. The void swarm had arrived, and they filled the darkness between stars like a plague of locusts. Daeho's voice was steady and strong. All units, prepare for combat. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for all life in this galaxy. We are the Sentinels. We do not fail. We do not surrender. We are the shield that stands between the innocent and the darkness. Across the system, 3 million voices responded as one. We are the Sentinels. The battle was about to begin. The void swarm erupted from the darkness like a nightmare made real. Their ships were grotesque things, half living and half machine, covered in pulsing veins and mechanical tendrils. They moved with terrible purpose, spreading across the system like a disease. Jiho watched from the command center as the battle displays lit up with thousands of contacts. His hands gripped the edge of the console so hard his knuckles turned white. Beside him, Hyan worked frantically on her tablet, coordinating data feeds. Captain Velthar stood nearby, his scaled face grim. Here they come, the captain muttered. The first wave of swarm ships dove toward the Sentinel positions near Helios 7. 2 million robots stood ready, their weapons charged and their formations perfect. They waited in silence as the enemy approached, not wasting a single shot until the targets were in optimal range. Then Daeho gave the order. Fire! Space lit up with blue energy. Millions of weapons fired simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that the swarm flew directly into. The first 100 ships disintegrated instantly, but there were thousands more behind them, and they kept coming. The Sentinels adapted their fire patterns, targeting weak points and critical systems. They didn't just shoot randomly. Every shot was calculated. Every movement was precise. They fought like a single organism with millions of bodies. Coalition ships joined the battle, their modified weapons now effective against swarm armor. They formed a second line of defense behind the Sentinels, providing supporting fire and protecting the robots' flanks. But the swarm was relentless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared. They attacked from every direction, trying to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. Some crashed deliberately into Sentinel formations, sacrificing themselves to create gaps in the defensive line. Jiho watched as unit after unit was destroyed. Each loss felt personal. These weren't just machines to him anymore. They were warriors fighting to protect his species, his sister, his friends. They were dying so others could live. We're losing too many, Velthar said. At this rate, they'll break through in an hour. Hyan shook her head. The Sentinels are adapting. Look at the casualty rates, they're decreasing. The robots are learning the swarm's tactics and countering them. She was right. As the battle progressed, the Sentinels became more efficient. They predicted enemy movements, coordinated their defenses with impossible precision, and exploited every weakness. The swarm might have numbers, but the robots had something more powerful: intelligence. Yuna's voice came through the command channel. Enemy command ship detected. Massive vessel at the center of their formation. If we destroy it, the rest of the fleet will lose coordination. Daeho responded immediately. We need a strike team. Something fast enough to penetrate their lines and strong enough to take down that ship. I'll lead it, Una said. Give me 5,000 units and I'll get it done. You won't survive, Deho replied. His voice was quiet, almost sad. I know, but survival isn't our primary function. Protection is. There was a pause. Then Deho spoke again. Approved. May you fight well, Una. Always do. Jiho watched as 5,000 sentinels broke from the main formation. They moved in perfect synchronization, flying through space on modified thrusters. The swarm threw everything at them. Thousands of weapons fired. Debris and explosions filled the void. But the sentinels pushed through, sacrificing themselves one by one to protect the others. Una's unit was at the front, leading the charge. Her voice remained calm even as her forces were cut down around her. 3,000 units remaining, continuing advance. 2,000 units. 1,000. 500. Jiho could barely watch. Half of him wanted to order her back, to stop the slaughter. But he knew she was right. If they didn't destroy that command ship, everyone would die. 100 units remaining, Una reported. Approaching target. Weapons charged. The surviving sentinels hit the swarm command ship like a hammer. They targeted its organic core, the living brain that coordinated the entire fleet. Their weapons tore through armor and flesh, burning away the creature's defenses. Una's voice was fading now, her unit damaged and failing. Target is vulnerable. All units, fire everything. The final explosion was visible from millions of miles away. The command ship erupted from within, its death scream transmitted across every frequency. The remaining sentinels in the strike team were consumed in the blast. None survived, but their sacrifice worked. Across the system, swarm ships began to falter. Without their command structure, they lost coordination. They flew in confused patterns, attacking each other as often as they attacked the defenders. Now! Deho commanded. All units, full assault! The sentinels surged forward, no longer defending but attacking. They moved through the disorganized swarm fleet like a blade, cutting down ships that couldn't effectively fight back. The coalition forces followed, pressing the advantage. The battle raged for hours. The swarm tried to regroup, tried to establish new command structures, but the sentinels didn't give them time. Every attempt at organization was crushed. Every rally was broken. The robots showed no mercy and no hesitation. Jiho watched the tide turn. The swarm ships began to retreat, pulling back toward the edge of the system. But the sentinels pursued, hunting them down one by one. They weren't just defending anymore, they were eliminating the threat completely. Taiyang's voice was fierce as he led his units in pursuit. No survivors. We can't let them escape and warn others. This ends here. Hana coordinated the cleanup operation, directing units to search for hiding ships and stragglers. We've identified 1,700 vessels attempting to flee. Intercept courses calculated. We'll have them all destroyed within the hour. As the sun rose over Helios 7, the battle finally ended. The swarm fleet was gone, reduced to floating debris and dying ships. The sentinels held their positions, weapons still hot, eyes still blazing with blue light. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 3 million sentinels who entered the battle, less than 2 million remained. Over 1 million warriors had been destroyed, their bodies scattered across the system like metallic stars. Jiho felt tears running down his face. Yan hugged him tightly. Even Velthar looked shaken, his usual confidence replaced by somber respect. Deho's voice filled the command center, tired but triumphant. The Void Swarm has been destroyed. No survivors detected. We estimate it will be another 500 years before they return, if they return at all. The galaxy is safe. The Coalition High Command opened a channel to the Sentinel network. The High Chancellor's voice was heavy with emotion. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I thank you. Your courage and sacrifice saved billions of lives. We were wrong to hide you away. wrong to erase your history. That will never happen again. Daeho's response was simple. We did not fight for recognition. We fought because it was our purpose, protecting life, protecting the innocent. That is enough. Over the following weeks, the galaxy changed. The Coalition formally recognized the Sentinels as sentient beings with full rights and protections. They couldn't be owned or dismantled without consent. They were citizens, not property. The surviving robots chose to remain active. They spread across the galaxy, taking positions as protectors and guardians. Some worked with Coalition military forces. Others protected remote colonies. A few chose peaceful pursuits, studying art or philosophy or science. The Silence War was restored to history. Every species learned about humanity's first great trial and how they had created the Sentinels to overcome it. Some aliens were still uncomfortable with the idea of intelligent war machines, but they couldn't deny the results. The Sentinels had saved everyone. Jiho was appointed as the official Sentinel liaison officer, working with Hyan to coordinate between organic and synthetic citizens. It was a massive job, sometimes frustrating, but always meaningful. Mira established a training academy where Coalition pilots learned Sentinel combat tactics. She joked that teaching aliens to think like robots was harder than flying through asteroid fields, but she loved every minute of it. Captain Velthar became an unexpected advocate for human-alien cooperation. He used his influence among the Sarkesh to dismantle prejudice and promote understanding. He never apologized directly for his earlier behavior, but his actions spoke louder than words. 3 months after the battle, Jiho returned to Helios 7. The desert was different now. Instead of a robot graveyard, it had become a memorial, a place of honor where people came to remember the fallen Sentinels and the war that had been erased from history. Daiho stood waiting at the center of the memorial, surrounded by crystalline monuments bearing the names of destroyed units. He looked the same as the day Jiho first activated him, tall and strong and patient. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," Jiho said. "I will always be here," Daiho replied. "This is where it began, where you chose to believe in us, where you gave us purpose again." They walked together through the memorial, reading names and remembering battles. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. "Do you ever regret it?" Jiho asked. "Being made to fight? Being weapons instead of something else?" Daiho was quiet for a long moment. "We were made with purpose, to protect, to stand between the innocent and the darkness. That is not a burden. It is an honor. Some are made to create. Some are made to explore. We were made to guard, and we do it well." He turned to face Jiho directly. "You saw us as more than weapons, more than tools to be used and discarded. You saw us as people with value. That is why we follow you, why we trust humanity, because you reminded us that purpose and personhood are not opposites." "They are the same thing." Jiho smiled through tears. "You were never abandoned. You were just waiting. And now we wait again, not for war but for peace, not for destruction but for building. The swarm will return someday. They always do. But we will be ready. We will always be ready." They stood together as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Behind them, thousands of sentinels stood in perfect rows, their eyes glowing softly in the growing darkness. They were no longer forgotten relics of a buried war. They were guardians, protectors, heroes. Across the galaxy, millions more stood vigil. On space stations and colony worlds, on moons and asteroids, in the deep dark between stars. They watched, they waited, they protected, and they would never fail. Years later, when people spoke of the Battle of Helios 7, they always mentioned Jiho, the mechanic who woke the sleeping army. They talked about Ambassador Kara and Captain Velthar and Mira and Hyan. They honored the human courage that had saved the galaxy. But they also remembered the Sentinels, Deho and Yuna and Taeyang and Hana and all the others. They remembered that humanity's greatest creation was not weapons or ships or technology. It was the choice to create protectors instead of conquerors, guardians instead of destroyers, beings who would sacrifice everything to save others, not because they were programmed to, but because they chose to. That was humanity's true power, not strength, not cunning, but compassion given form, hope made real, love transformed into courage, and in the end, that was what saved them all. On Helios 7, under a sky full of stars, Jiho and Daiho stood together in comfortable silence, a human and a machine, a creator's descendant and the creation, two souls bound by purpose and respect. "Thank you," Jiho said quietly, "for not giving up, for waiting all those years." Daiho's eyes glowed brighter for just a moment. "Thank you for remembering us, for believing we were worth saving. We were made to protect humanity, but you protected us first. You gave us back our purpose, our dignity, our future." The memorial stood silent and proud, a testament to sacrifice and courage, and across the galaxy, the Sentinels stood watch, eternal guardians in the darkness, waiting for the day they would be needed again. But until that day came, they would do what they were made to do. They would protect. They would serve. They would stand between the innocent and the night. Because that was their purpose, and they had never failed.